Hello, and welcome to episode 21 of Charlotte Mecklenburg History with Dan Morrill. Today is August 9th, 2020, and I am Dan's daughter, Mary Dana, and I am here with Dan through Zoom. Hey, Dad.
Good afternoon.
And today we are talking about the Piedmont and Northern Railway. So thank you for being with us. And Dad, I'm going to let you take it away.
Well, I'm going to put it in the larger context, first of all, which I'm always prone to do, Mary Dana.
Yes, that's true.
Um, you know, I've always liked people who think outside the box. And we have some people in Charlotte Mecklenburg history that almost nobody knows who made an incredibly important contribution. In fact, your life and my life, for reasons that I'll talk about in a few minutes, are deeply influenced by this man named Dr. Walker Gill Wiley. Now, you can see he was born in 1848 now. And by the way, he's another South Carolinian. We've dealt with other South Carolinians. Edward Dilworth Latta, who was born in 1851, who developed Dilworth. Daniel Augustus Tompkins, who was born in 1851, and who was, of course, this tremendous New South industrialist. And this is another South Carolinian, and I would say his vision is exactly the same as was true of Latta and was true of Tompkins. He was a very, very successful surgeon. He actually grew up in Chester, South Carolina. He graduated from what is now the University of South Carolina. By the way, he did fight for the Confederacy. He was in the Confederate Army, and I guess in the mind of some people that would sort of condemn him. But I would say you have to take into account the full context of one's life. He made a tremendous contribution in medicine. He got his medical degree from Bellevue Medical School in New York City, which then was a very prestigious medical school. He was a practicing surgeon at Bellevue Hospital in New York City, which still exists. He really was a major figure in establishing protocols of care and practice in terms of surgery. He really was the pioneer in the development of professional nursing education. He corresponded with Florence Nightingale, and he established really the first major professional school of nursing in the United States. So he had no reason to do anything else. He would be an important enough figure in that sense as well. But Dr. Wiley also had this feeling, and Latta was the same way, and Tompkins was the same way. He felt a real need to go and help the South. And he had the same vision that Tompkins had, that the real way to help the South out of the poverty that had really seized it as a result of the Civil War was to industrialize the South. Now, the degree that he got from the University of South Carolina was in civil engineering. And he went on a trip to Niagara Falls in the 1890s. And he was very impressed by the power of that water and the fact that there was a big hydroelectric station built downriver from the Niagara Falls. And he thought to himself, I wonder if we can do the same thing with the Catawba River. He knew that the water level between Marion, North Carolina, and Camden, South Carolina, dropped 700 feet. And he was wondering if maybe the industrialization of the Piedmont, primarily the textile industry, could be greatly aided by the development of hydroelectric power. He had a vision, and he was a very successful man, but he wasn't nearly as successful financially as James Buchanan Duke. Now you might see a foot over there.
I was just going to ask, what's that foot?
I'm going to talk about that. There's a story here. There's a story.
For those of you listening, there's a picture of a foot
There's a
beside
foot,
James
right? A
Buchanan
foot,
Duke
right?
for
Right.
some reason. Okay.
I'm going to tell you.
Okay.
You know how big things can come from little causes. Now
Yes.
think about that, Mary. Well, Dr. Wiley was he and Duke both lived in New York City. And Dr. Wiley was very, very well known among the upper crust of New York City. He was a very highly regarded surgeon. Well, James Buchanan Duke had a foot problem. I think it was his big toe, but I'm not sure. It was certainly a toe. He had a real problem with the toe. He had an infection. And he called Dr. Wiley and said, would you come over to my house and look at my foot? So Dr. Wiley came over and looked at his foot, and while he was working on his foot, Duke asked him, well, what you been doing? And Wiley said, well, he had this little power company that he established down in South Carolina because he'd gone to Niagara Falls and he just wondered what we could do with electric power. But he didn't really have quite enough money to be able to pull it off. This was a huge undertaking. And so this was in 1904, by the way. Mr. Duke said, well, that sounds like kind of an interesting project. Tell you what, I'll give you a bunch of money. So here was, now, by the way, Wiley had already come to Charlotte. He came as early as 1902 on a visit, and he had talked about this vision of electrifying the Catawba River and using it as a major source of power for cotton mills. And everybody thought he was nuts. They thought he was a screwball. Well, you know, a lot of times people who do things off the menu are thought to be a screwball.
Right.
But you notice this news article is July 28, 1905 from the Charlotte News. Now, this was after Duke told Wiley, I'm going to give you the money to start this gargantuan project. Because clearly what you're going to have to do, because, you know, the Catawba River is not really a big river. You're going to have to put up a lot of dams. And just for the record, no pun intended, the Catawba River is the most dammed river in the United States. There are more dams on the Catawba River. There are 11 dams on the Catawba River.
It's the most dammed river In
That's
the
the most
US?
dammed river in the United States. Well, look
Okay.
what this says. It says, you know, 3 years ago when I came to Charlotte and told those cotton mill owners what I proposed to do, they looked at me as if I was an escaped lunatic. Many of them thought I had lost my reason. I'm in a position today to make good all those seemingly extravagant statements. Now, you know what allowed him to be able to say he could make good? Mr. Duke's money.
Yeah.
If all the power needed by this immediate section is not available just now, I promise that it will be in the shortest possible time. In other words, he was going to get to work. Now, there was one final figure that was really important in this process, and that's a man named William States Lee. The company that was created by Duke's money was initially known as Southern Power Company. Of course, later after Mr. Duke died, it became known as Duke Power, and now it's Duke Energy. But William States Lee was a brilliant engineer, electrical engineer. By the way, just for the record, he was another South Carolinian.
Wow.
He had grown up in Lancaster, South Carolina, just
And I
right down the
and I
road
see
here from Charlotte.
from your picture that the College of Engineering at UNC Charlotte is named after him.
It's actually named after his grandson,
Okay.
but his grandson, who a lot of people know as Bill Lee, who died in, I think, 1995. But certainly Bill Lee took his inspiration from his grandfather. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, there's a legacy there.
Right.
Now, William States Lee said, we're not only going to build a series of dams, and I've got all those dams listed that go down that river there. Now, our connection is, Mary Dana, we have a condo on Lake Hickory.
Right.
Well, Lake Hickory is formed by one of those dams, actually the Osborne Dam. So the reason we can look out on that water is because of Walker Gill Wiley, James B. Duke, and William States Lee, because William States Lee came up with this idea of a connected electrical grid. Where you not only depended upon one power system, but you tied all these power systems together. And as a matter of fact, this system runs from Lake James at the upper end to Lake Wateree at the lower end, from Marion, North Carolina to Camden, South Carolina. So these people, I mean, we wouldn't have the region that we do today. Not only is it important for electric power, but it's where we get our water from.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Mountain Island Lake was the second major dam that they created. Now, here's a little comment about William States Lee, and I'll read the sentence after the little yellow part. There was much of romance as well as force in the life of this engineering genius whose life meant so much to the Carolinas and to the new industrial South. So this is a big, these people have, you talk about impact. Here's a wonderful picture, by the way, taken in 1905. This was the first dam that they built. Right here, that is James Buchanan Duke.
Mm-hmm.
This is Walker Gill Wiley, Dr. Walker Gill Wiley. I have absolutely no idea who this guy is, but this is William States Lee. And they are building a dam, which it says here they started in August of 1905 at Great Falls, South Carolina. So this is the first of these dams that were built.
Okay. The one at Great Falls.
Yeah. Now, not only did they want to use the electric power to power the mills, But they also wanted to build an electric railroad. Wouldn't run on steam, no steam engines, no soot coming out that stack. They're going to have an electric railroad. And they were going to connect the Piedmont with the North. So they called it the Piedmont and Northern. And that's the official emblem of the Piedmont Northern Railway Station. See that spark down there?
I do. I like your sound
Okay,
effect. Yes.
right. Well, that's the emblem of it. Now this railroad, the Piedmont and Northern Railway Company, was to have both passenger service and it was also going to have shipping. So it was freight trains and passenger trains. And their idea was to build it all the way from South Carolina up to the north. It was going to parallel and compete with the Southern Railroad. In fact, they said it was going to be the great electric system of the South.
So it was going to run on overhead wires, like how a
Absolutely.
trolley runs.
That's exactly
Similar.
right.
Okay. I
It
was
was
going to
going to be
ask
all
that.
electric. And it
Mhm.
was. It was all electric.
Oh.
Now, it was a massive undertaking. Now, here is a picture of a
Oh.
typical Piedmont and Northern passenger train coming out of Gastonia. It actually, when it left Gastonia coming to Charlotte, it was an interurban line. Interurbans, see, there weren't very many. The line opened in 1912, and there weren't many cars in 1912, especially for mill workers. They didn't have enough money to buy a car.
And I see
They were lucky if they could buy a banjo.
a banjo, Dad.
And, well, I
Did,
mean, they listen to country music. These are country people.
so I see this picture was taken in 1930. Is that
Well,
correct?
that's right, but
Okay.
that's later. But
Right,
they've
but
been doing
still.
that since 1912.
Right.
Okay,
Okay.
now, and they saw this as part of a package. Electricity to power cotton mills, electricity for a railroad, electricity for industrialization. And they did all kinds of promotional material. Built to serve, serves to build. See? Now, this is Trine Street.
Hmm.
This is Charlotte. And this is Gastonia. So they had a lot of interesting promotions. One of the things that they wanted to do was to kind of encourage people to forget about the Civil War.
Hmm.
They wanted to reinforce the fact that the South was part of the country. So they definitely illustrated that this was a strong historical tie with the United States. And of course, Andrew Jackson was from down in the Waxhaws. James K. Polk, two presidents of the United States, born in Mecklenburg County. So they really emphasized history. And they also featured the United States Mint because they wanted the North to look upon the South as part of a unified country. Okay.
Hmm.
Now, this was going to be a big operation. Now, I know this is not Cantoner, this is a more contemporary picture, but Mary Dana building this railroad was a huge undertaking.
Yeah, I see that because
Now,
that bridge.
this is really one of the most imposing structures on the Piedmont Northern. This is the bridge over the South Fork of the Catawba River. And I actually wanted to show a video, but it's a little bit tricky.
Okay.
But I mean, you notice there are no guardrails on this sucker. I
Yes.
mean, that train's right up there on top of that thing. And when you go over that bridge, it is awesome.
It's
It
still
is
used
awesome.
today? The bridge is still used
Oh
today?
yes, yes. That bridge is definitely used today, but it was a huge undertaking. Now let me tell you what happened to them. They never finished the railroad. And the reason was twofold. First of all, World War I really interrupted construction.
Hmm.
But even more than that, when they wanted to get going again, building all the way to the north in the 1920s, the Southern Railroad, using its political muscle, got the Interstate Commerce Commission to prevent the Piedmont and Northern from crossing state lines because they said that the market couldn't support two competing railroads that basically ran the same route. So the reality is that this dream never got fulfilled. Only a portion of the PNN was ever built. There was a larger section in South Carolina, and there was a smaller section that was completed in North Carolina before the First World War. So I want to just go over the map with you in a minute because I'm going to be showing you some examples. How are we on time, by the way? Where are we?
Oh, you've been talking about 22 minutes.
Okay, well, we're not going to finish this deal today,
We'll do the
but
rest next
we're getting
week.
started. Are you finding it interesting?
I think it's incredibly interesting. I did not
Okay,
know a lot of this.
okay.
These railroad tracks, and that the North Carolina part looks like it only went from Gastonia to Charlotte. It's about
With
as
a
far as
spur
they
to
got.
Belmont.
Yeah, and that was
With a
it.
spur to Belmont. That's
Okay.
exactly right. Now in South Carolina, they had 89 miles of track. It's and let's go over it because we're going to look at some stations here. It started a little town called Clifton, which was between Spartanburg and Gaffney. What they were doing, they were building to go to Gastonia,
Hmm.
and they got stopped. Goes down to Spartanburg, goes down to Greenville, went down to a junction at Belton. Then it went down to, there was a spur that went down to Anderson, South Carolina. And two of the stations that we're going to look at today are on this section that went from Belton down to Greenwood, South Carolina. So that's what was actually built. Of course, they connected with other railroads, and the Piedmont Northern operated until 1969 and kept
Oh,
carrying passengers until 1951, but it never was completed. But I want to spend the rest of the time talking about architecture. And I think you're going to recognize somebody if I can get this thing to work. Wait a minute, it'll work. Yeah. Guess who?
yes. CC Hook.
Guess who? They had to hire somebody to do these railroads. Well, they got D.C.C. Hook. Let's go back. There he is. Good old C.C. Hook. Have we talked about C.C. Hook before?
We have talked about him a lot. He was extremely important to the architecture of Charlotte.
And he was the man that was hired to do these stations. Now I'm going to show you some stations that still exist. I'm not sure. I know I've identified 4 stations in South Carolina. There might be more, but this is a work in progress. But the first one I'm going to show you is in Donalds. Now Donalds, this, if you look at this, see the upper white arrow?
Yes.
That's where Donalds is. So Highway 178, which basically goes from, it doesn't go directly, but Essentially, it runs from Greenville down to Greenwood. It's on that section of track, right. See the Belton to Greenwood section.
Yes.
Well, that's where we're looking. That's
Okay.
where we're looking. So we're going to look at the Donald Station, okay? And I'll make some statements about the architecture there. Now, here's an area. Now, by the way, you got to give a lot of credit to Donald's, because I tell you, you talk about. I don't even think they got a Wendy's, and I don't even think they got a McDonald's in
I
Donald's.
was going to ask if they had a McDonald's
It,
in Donald's. It's
Well,
small. Okay.
let me show you now. Here's Highway 178. This is coming into Donald's. Do you want to see downtown Donald's?
Sure.
That's it.
Oh, wow.
I mean,
Not much.
now you come down here. This street going off to the left is East Main Street, and we're going to turn on East Main Street. Going down East Main Street, you see something coming up over there? See something coming
I
up?
see a station. Looks like a station.
Well,
There it is.
now they have really, now that's the station before they figured out the full restoration.
Mm-hmm.
But you've got to give those people credit. Now, I'm going to spend a little time on this, because we're going to see that there's a standard station. First of all, do you know what's meant by logo architecture?
No, I don't know what that is.
Well, it's like if you go to a McDonald's, they basically all look about the same, right? I mean,
Oh,
you got a
yeah.
sign, right? And
Mm-hmm.
in other words, logo architecture means that you want people to know that that's a P&N railroad station.
You recognize it by
Yeah,
the way
in
the
other
building
words,
looks.
Hook was not, he was told, we don't want you to go in there and make a big variety of buildings. We want people to recognize what we got here. Now, this is a pretty standard. We're going to see some variations, particularly with the station that remains in Greer, South Carolina, and the station that remains in Piedmont, North Carolina, which I think are the most distinctively different. But this is pretty much a standard station.
And I want to mention that now, so C.C. Hook, he designed every single station, right, on the entire line, North and South Carolina, even outside of Mecklenburg County, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Now, there were a few that were built earlier,
Mm-hmm.
but yes, yes,
Okay.
C.C. Hook. And people who know P&N stations, they immediately recognize them. Now, let me talk about its functionally, first of all. This is a combined passenger freight depot. Now, the end that's the closer to you, that's the freight section. See that big door on the side there?
Yes.
Well, that's where they'd load the freight, put freight in. So trucks would drive up, put freight in that door. The railroad tracks on the other side of the station. Train would come and it'd put the freight in there. Okay, got it?
Mm-hmm.
Now, the far end is the passenger section. That's where the passengers would wait for the train. They'd get on the train and ride it wherever they were going to go. Okay, and of course it would be all electric. Now let me talk about it architecturally, because this was a briefly popular style. What this is known as is Spanish colonial style. First of all, it's a very, very, it doesn't have a great deal of ornamentation to it. You know how we talked about the Queen Anne style in Dilworth last week, and all this filigree and all that kind of stuff?
Mm-hmm.
This style of architecture was very, very popular in the 19 teens. And there were two factors that really led to that. One was the opening of the Panama Canal. Now, the Panama Canal had opened in whatever, early 1900s. And of course, it was in Central America, a Spanish-speaking area. And they had a big celebration of the opening of the Panama Canal that was held in California. And people went out there, and the buildings look like this. They look like this. Brick. Essentially, what you've got are really three colors in this building. You've got red brick, you've got yellow brick. Well, you got four colors. You got red brick, yellow brick, brown wood with these really very broad brackets holding up this broad soffit under the roof. And then, of course, you've got this very distinctive reddish tiled roof. And see those little dormers up there? There's little triangle dormers on
Yes.
the top. Well, that bespeaks of this Spanish look. You think of Spain, of course, Spain being a hot country. The other thing that caused this architecture, Spanish architecture, to be very popular was because during the First World War, Spain didn't participate in World War One, so a lot of people traveled to Spain. And even before the war broke out, they knew that Spain would not be drawn into it. So Spain became a very popular place for people to visit. So that's what this architecture is. And I can tell you, if you know PNN stations, man, you'll recognize them in a heartbeat. I mean, they're just so unbelievably recognizable. Now, I don't have any very good pictures of this one, but we're going to move down the highway, 178, go down to the next town called Hodges. Now, there ain't much to Hodges either. Now,
Well,
see
I
the
just have,
arrow?
wait, I have one more, I have a question about Donald's. What are they doing with that station now?
Uh, I think an antique shop is using it for storage.
Okay.
I believe.
Okay.
I think I'm right in that.
I
But
just like to know what's happening with these buildings
I'm
right
not gonna
now.
know in all cases, Mary Dana.
It's
I happen
okay.
to know in that one, but
You just tell me when you know.
don't push me too hard on that. Anyway,
Okay.
now here's Hodges. Now you can see that Donald and Hodges are obviously on a highway, so that would be also a rail line, and
Mhm.
that's going from Greenville, South Carolina to Greenwood, South Carolina, and these are just stations along the way. Now, that arrow points to where the station is, and you can hardly see it, and I don't have a real good picture of it, but I have enough of a picture that you can tell, and I don't think this was used for anything at all. But at least they did save it. It's exactly the same type of station that you saw in Donald's. It's a combination freight passenger PNN station, and it's got exactly the same brickwork, it's got exactly the same roof, it's got exactly the same features. And I wish I had a better picture of it, but I can tell you right now it wasn't easy to get that one. Now you see that blue arrow up there?
Yes. At
Way up in the corner?
Anderson.
At Anderson. Well, see the white arrow? That points to what we're going to look at. Now, this is another type of station, which would be in the larger towns. Charlotte had one, Gastonia had one, Spartanburg had one, Greenville had one. They're all gone. But this one
Oh,
remains. Now, coming up over the road, you see something coming up over there. It looks kind of
looks like a station.
look like a station.
So all the big ones in the larger cities are gone.
That's right.
This is the only one left
Right. Now
in
this,
Anderson.
in the
Okay.
bigger cities,
That's a
they
big station.
separated the passenger function from the freight function. You know how in the little stations they were combined.
Mm-hmm.
One was the passenger and freight were both the same. But this is exclusively a freight station. This has no passenger function whatsoever because Anderson was a larger city, okay? Well, you can see, even though this has a gable roof, not a hip roof. I should have pointed out a hip roof before, but I will again. You know, you can always tell a gable roof when it's just got a triangle at the end, like that at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
building. But you see, and they have painted the brick on the lower section. They got some green paint out and painted the brick. But it's got the same windows. It's got those dormers. See those little
Yeah, same brackets under the
1, 2,
soffit.
3, 4, 5, 6 of those. So this, I mean, if you know P&N, I can tell you right now, woo, it's a P&N.
Yeah, logo architecture, right?
Logo
As you said,
architecture,
okay.
exactly. There it is, and you
Okay,
can
that's a
see
good picture.
it's got a series. And by the way, the emblem for the P&N is up in the end of the building. So say bye-bye to it. Now, is this next station's, I
Now, I
think,
was just going to say, this might be a good stopping point.
what
For
time
the,
is it?
well, let's see. You have been talking almost 40 minutes.
I got one more station.
Okay, let's do one more station in South Carolina. Okay,
It's in
good.
Greer.
Okay,
You've been to Greer,
I
haven't you?
have. I've been to Greer.
Okay, now here it is. Now this is a very distinctive station. This is a passenger freight combination, but obviously they had some administrative offices in the passenger side. It's more elaborate, but you can
Yes.
see it is the same thing. Got those little
Yes.
dormers up there, Spanish Revival. That's the Greer station. Now, what we're going to do next week, there's one of the stations we saw, another one, South Carolina stations that we saw.
Right.
By the way, some are gone, like the Seltzer one, gone.
Oh, yeah, that's
Yeah, but
destroyed
we're
by
going to be
fire.
going to North Carolina,
Okay.
and I'm going to talk about the North Carolina P&N buildings. But remember, the real story is the vision of the South that W. Gill Wiley, William Statesley, and James Buchanan Duke had, and that's what they told C.C. Hook to do.
And that's what Lake Wiley's named after him, right?
Absolutely,
Yeah, so that's where it came
absolutely.
from. Okay, well, great, Dad. Well, thank you. That was all very interesting. I look forward to hearing the rest of the story next week with the North Carolina stations. And thanks, everybody, for being with us. And we will see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.